Preface. Even a mob boss fears the 7-year crisis. What? Which drama did you watch? No. I read a novel. Get ready for another round of laughs and over-the-top moments. This time, the whole gang is here. meandthee, Peach, Mr. Rome, and Mock, the secretary who's now been promoted to Rome's beloved sidekick. Just how funny, hilarious, and heartwarming will this story be? Only this book has the answer. With love. Sunflower. Chapter 1. They say the 7-year crisis is real, that couples who have been together for a long time often face challenges in their 7th year, sometimes even leading to a breakup. But perhaps it's simply life putting them to the test, seeing whether their love is strong enough to endure. What do you think? Is the 7-year crisis real? Therikit Kian Arseny, the eldest son of a powerful Russian mafia family and CEO of a massive corporation with countless subsidiaries, asked the question out of the blue. His most well-known venture was his global fragrance brand, a name recognized worldwide with record-breaking international sales. At that moment, he sat behind his large desk, his fingers clasped beneath his chin, wearing a serious expression. Instead of discussing the towering pile of work before him, he directed an entirely unrelated question at his secretary. Ralph, his new secretary, had recently taken over from Mock, who was also one of these longtime friends. Thanks to Mock's meticulous handover and Ralph's years of professional experience, he had quickly settled into the role. The number one rule of being meandthee's secretary was simple. Peachy Yaret, his partner and part-time photographer for Arseny Corp, always came first. No exceptions. Whether the matter was trivial or urgent, whether meandthee was busy or not, anything involving Peach took priority over everything else. By now, listening to meandthee's thoughts and offering advice had become second nature to Ralph. You and Peach are as solid as a rock. That 7-year crisis doesn't stand a chance against the two of you. Ralph replied expressionlessly, his calm voice never faltering as he slid another stack of documents across the desk for thee to sign, without interrupting his work. But I'm not getting any younger, he sighed softly. He was approaching his 38th birthday. And with this 7-year thing, who knew? Anything could happen. Ralph didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at his watch before saying casually, "Why don't you ask Mr. Peach yourself? I'm sure you'll get your answer if you talk to him face to face." "You're right." He rose so abruptly that his chair rolled backward. Grabbing his bag, he headed straight for the door, dismissing his secretary with a casual wave that clearly meant, "You're done for the day." Today, his partner was working at the company, and he planned to pick him up so they could go home together. Peachy Yaret, or Peach, was a freelance photographer considered one of the best in the country. However, because he was highly selective about the jobs he accepted and had taken on fewer and fewer assignments since getting married, he had become something of a hidden gem. Not many people knew his name, which suited thee just fine. Peach's talent belonged to him alone to admire. He rode the elevator down to the first floor, where the company's photography studio was located. Along the way, employees greeted him respectfully with nods and bows, though no one seemed particularly surprised to see him. "Isn't that the CEO?" A newcomer in the studio across the hall stared at the tall man until he disappeared from view, her eyes wide with surprise. "That's the CEO? The one who looks terrifying and is rumored to be the heir to a mafia family," a young intern whispered excitedly. "I never thought someone like me would actually get to see him." "That's him," a senior employee confirmed with a nod, making the intern's eyes grow even wider. Chuckling, she gave the young woman a light pat on the shoulder. "Peach is working today, so the CEO came to pick him up. Totally normal." "Wait, Peach really has a boyfriend." Her voice was full of disappointment, as though her heart had just been shattered, making her superior laugh even harder. "Peach is married, and his husband is definitely not someone you'd want to mess with." Fortunately, Peach's fearsome husband never heard that conversation. He strode into the larger studio, pushing the door open and immediately searching the room for his partner. Standing beside several monitors was a tall, slender man with fair, flawless skin that suggested he spent very little time in the sun. His shoulder-length hair was tied into a low bun at the nape of his neck, and his lean frame was perfectly proportioned. The slightly oversized t-shirt he wore made him appear even slimmer while somehow emphasizing his graceful height. But he knew better. Beneath that loose shirt, Peach had gradually developed lean, well-defined muscles. After all, It was Thee who had introduced him to working out. Without hesitation, Thee walked straight over. Peach remained focused on reviewing the photos displayed on the monitor. The moment Thee reached him, he slipped a strong arm around Peach's waist and pulled him back against his chest in a familiar embrace. Peach wasn't small by any means. He was tall and slender, an excellent example of the average Thai man. Yet beside Thee's broad frame, he seemed to disappear completely into his embrace. Or perhaps it was simply because Peach was the love of his life. To Thee, Peach would always be his precious boy, even if he was tall, confident, and already the father of 2 children. Peach glanced up briefly, a gentle smile tugging at the corner of his lips before relaxing comfortably against the familiar embrace. His hands never stopped working as he continued scrolling through the photos. Around them, the staff barely spared them a glance before returning to work, completely accustomed to the sight. Peach had been working part-time as a photographer here for quite some time. Officially, he was only a freelancer, but in reality, everyone treated him like family. As the older brother of one of the staff members, he was always willing to lend a hand whenever needed. It had even become an unspoken tradition. Whenever Peach worked at the company, Thee, his husband, and the company's CEO would personally come to pick him up. No one found it unusual anymore. Beautiful, Thee murmured in a deep, steady voice, resting his chin lightly on Peach's shoulder. Peach laughed softly as he zoomed in on one of the images. I think it came out beautifully. The lighting's perfect, the atmosphere is exactly what I wanted, and the model looked completely natural. We got it in just one take. He pointed toward the elegant blue-black perfume bottle at the center of the image. Look, Kian. See how the glass catches the light. It's gorgeous. Yes, beautiful. Thee leaned closer and pressed a quick kiss against Peach's cheek. But I meant you. You're the beautiful one. Kian, stop it. Peach turned toward him with mock annoyance, stepping out of his embrace despite the blush spreading across his cheeks. I'm still working. The mob boss smiled. That soft, embarrassed tone Peach always used whenever he called him by his middle name, a privilege reserved only for those closest to him, never failed to melt his heart. Every time he heard it, it felt as though his chest caved in, dissolving every trace of the cold, ruthless man everyone else knew. And whenever Peach looked this flustered, it took every ounce of self-control not to wrap him in another crushing hug and refuse to let go. Work's done. Let's go home. He declared firmly, leaving no room for argument. He picked up Peach's well-worn camera bag and slung it effortlessly over his shoulder. Your husband's here to pick you up. You're not going to leave me waiting, are you? Go home already, Peach. One of the younger employees called teasingly as she carried a box past them. If we keep you here any longer, the boss is going to glare us to death. We'll probably lose our bonuses. He looked at her with rare approval. Dinner's on me tonight. Send the bill to my secretary. Thank you, boss. She practically skipped away. Peach could only bury his face in his hands as the blush on his cheeks deepened. With an exaggerated sigh, he saved his work onto a USB drive, shut down his computer, and stood up. After all, with such a loving, overprotective husband, how could he not indulge him once in a while? Outside, a sleek black luxury SUV worth 8 figures was already waiting. Like every wealthy CEO in television dramas, he traveled in an expensive black vehicle. But unlike the flashy sports cars of his younger days, he now preferred a spacious family SUV, so Peach and their 2 children could ride comfortably. Those 2 children, though they had once been orphaned, had become Thee's entire world. If either of them ever expressed a desire to inherit the family empire, he wouldn't hesitate to place the entire Arseny conglomerate in their hands. Peach had argued against it more than once. He had been the one who wanted to adopt the children, and he had already planned how to provide for their future. There was no need for Thee or the Arseny family to shoulder such responsibility. But Thee had simply replied, We're married. We're family. Those 2 children are our children. Their future is something we'll build together. Peach hadn't answered. He had simply smiled through tears that refused to stop falling. After searching for more than 20 years, he had finally found what it meant to have a family. They climbed into the car, and the driver pulled smoothly away from the studio. Inside, neither of them spoke. He focused on reviewing the documents he had abandoned earlier, while Peach examined the photographs on his iPad. The only connection between them was their tightly clasped hands. 7 years had passed, yet their love hadn't changed in the slightest. He glanced down at their joined hands, a satisfied smile playing across his lips. For some reason, he felt as though he had won a competition. He wasn't even sure who his opponent was. Unable to resist, he pulled out his phone and snapped a picture of their intertwined hands, carefully framing Peach's wedding ring in the center. Satisfied, he sent the photo to the family group chat, making sure to tag his younger brother overseas before returning to his paperwork with a contented sigh. Then, Peach withdrew his hand. Therakit's head jerked up in surprise. He kept his expression under control, but his heart lurched. Peach seemed completely oblivious. He simply steadied his iPad and began writing notes with his stylus, fully absorbed in his work. He slowly relaxed his shoulders. Even so, his eyes kept drifting back toward that slender hand. Somewhere deep inside him, warning bells began ringing. Loudly, but all he did was let out a quiet huff. There's no way something as ridiculous as the 7-year crisis could happen to me. After making their way through the evening traffic, the black SUV eventually pulled into the driveway of their large suburban home. He stepped out first before turning to help his photographer husband from the car. Dad, you're home. A teenage boy's voice greeted them. Around 15 or 16 years old, he had been waiting by the front door and hurried over the moment the car arrived. Mock, don't you have plans with your friends today? Peach asked gently. Our group project's already finished, so everyone's free today. Marn's taking a bath upstairs. She'll be down in a minute. Although he was only 15, nearly 16, Mock was already taller than his adoptive father. All right, let's have dinner. You must be hungry, he said with a small nod. His voice was calm and unusually gentle, lacking its usual commanding authority. The three of them headed into the dining room. Moments later, a young girl came running downstairs. Her delicate features were already beginning to blossom, hinting that she would grow into a beautiful young woman. She took her usual seat before looking at her adoptive father with a slight frown. Dad, you skipped lunch again today, didn't you? If only she weren't so bossy. Peach, you didn't eat? Therakit immediately turned toward him, his sharp gaze filled with unmistakable concern. Caught between his husband and the two children, Peach hurriedly raised both hands in surrender. He offered them an apologetic smile. As a photographer, Peach often worked through lunch whenever the lighting or atmosphere was perfect. It was a habit that constantly worried his husband and children. Although he had been trying to change, old habits were hard to break. The shoot ran longer than expected. The previous model had another appointment, so I wanted to finish everything before they left. I didn't have time to eat. He smiled sheepishly. I'm sorry, darling. I didn't mean to make you worry. If you end up with a stomachache, we'll all be worried. Marn puffed out her cheeks. Then she turned to thee. And you too, Dad. If I don't pack your lunch, you never eat properly either. He slumped his shoulders. Sorry, I've been stuck in meetings all day. Let's eat, Mock said, quickly changing the subject as he gently ruffled his younger sister's hair. Thanks for always looking after everyone, Marn. Marn pouted, but said nothing more. Dinner began. Their family wasn't particularly strict about table manners, so chatting while eating was perfectly normal. Before long, they naturally started asking about school. After they finished eating, the housekeeper served dessert. Large stuffed bouillon floated in fragrant coconut milk. Peach absent-mindedly poked at his dessert before finally speaking. Next week, I have to travel overseas for work. Therakit froze with half a dumpling still in his mouth. He stared at Peach in complete disbelief. The mafia boss prided himself on knowing every detail of his husband's schedule. It had been years since Peach had accepted an assignment that required travel, let alone one overseas. What kind of job? When? Where? Why didn't I know about it? The questions came one after another. Peach only offered an awkward smile. It's a photography assignment. A magazine in England invited me to do a shoot. How long will you be gone? Mock asked, his brows furrowing exactly like these. For a brief moment, the resemblance between them was uncanny. Peach noticed it and smiled to himself before answering. The shoot itself will only take 3 or 4 days, but there are meetings and briefings beforehand. Altogether, I'll probably be gone for about a month. It won't be dangerous, will it? Mock asked seriously. Being the youngest, Marn didn't fully understand the realities of her parents' lives. Mock did. As he grew older, he had gradually explained the truth about their family and the dangers surrounding them. He often said his own father had done the same. The best protection, he believed, came from understanding the risks and being prepared for them. Keeping someone ignorant was never true protection. It won't be dangerous, Peach reassured him with a gentle smile. He knew exactly what Mock was worried about. Your dad will make sure someone goes with me. Besides, Uncle Rome is already there, so there's nothing to worry about. Peach. Thee's voice trembled with unease. Peach simply smiled and gently patted the back of his husband's hand. We'll talk about it later tonight, okay? Thee froze. For a split second, it felt as though thunder had crashed directly over his head. Could this really be it? Had the infamous 7-year crisis finally come for him? Chapter 2. Thirikit Kian Arseny was the elder brother of the head of the powerful Arseny mafia family and the CEO of several companies within the Arseny empire. Throughout his life, he had handled every challenge thrown his way with ease. Stress was a rare visitor, except when it came to his partner, Pichiyarit. He sat on the small sofa in their bedroom, rhythmically tapping his fingers against the table as his anxiety grew by the second. His ears were fixed on the sound of running water from the bathroom, where Peach was taking a shower. Normally, he would have been looking forward to sneaking in and teasing his husband a little. Tonight, however, worry consumed him. The mob boss picked up his phone and called his secretary. After only a few rings, a sleepy voice answered. How do you get through the 7-year crisis? Huh. Ralph sounded thoroughly confused and more than a little annoyed, as though he'd just been dragged out of bed. Boss, what soap opera have you been watching this time? Didn't Mr. Peach tell you to ask him before you started watching dramas? I haven't been watching dramas. I've been reading novels, he replied proudly. Every one of them says the same thing. After 7 happy years together, love starts to fade, and eventually, it all falls apart. Mr. Peach isn't like that. He loves you very much, Ralph replied in his usual flat tone, sounding as though he were reading from a prepared script. He nodded to himself, feeling slightly reassured. Only slightly. Peach has never accepted an overseas job without telling me first. Something's different this time, he said firmly. Find out everything. What the assignment is, who's involved, and how long he'll be gone. Ralph fell silent for a moment, no doubt debating whether he should simply tell his boss to ask Peach directly. In the end, he sighed. I'll look into it. The call ended. He let out a long breath, still drumming his fingers against the armrest. Before he could think any further, the bathroom door opened. Peach stepped out. He wore nothing but a large white towel wrapped low around his waist. Droplets of water glistened across his fair skin, highlighting the lean muscles of his toned body. His tall, graceful frame and gentle features were enough to draw anyone's attention. Now in his early 30s, Peach had reached that stage of life where his quiet elegance had only become more captivating. He couldn't help wondering how many people had secretly fallen for him. The thought alone made him irrationally jealous. Jealous of the sky, jealous of the wind, jealous of absolutely everything, even though there wasn't the slightest reason to be. As his thoughts wandered, Peach quietly finished getting dressed before walking over. His fingers, still cool from the shower, lightly brushed against Thee's larger hand. Kian, are you upset? He looked up and immediately took Peach's hand. His thumb slowly traced soothing circles across Peach's skin. Feeling how cold his fingers were, he gently pulled him onto his lap and wrapped him in a tight embrace. Peach relaxed against him, his own hands slowly stroking Thee's broad back before resting his head against the crook of his neck. Kian, are you angry with me? The mafia boss let out a long sigh. Just hearing Peach ask that so softly was enough to make him surrender. He tightened his embrace and planted several playful kisses along Peach's cheek as punishment. I'm not angry. His voice was quiet as he finally loosened his arms. His warm gaze lingered lovingly on Peach. I was just surprised. Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped you look into it. Peach climbed off his lap and settled onto the bed, patting the space beside him. He joined him. Peach held his larger hand between both of his own. His fingertips, slightly rough from years of handling cameras, absent-mindedly stroked Thee's skin. The simple touch was strangely comforting. It's a photography assignment for a financial and investment magazine in the UK, Peach explained softly. They're preparing a feature on 4 rising business leaders. There'll be interviews, a photo shoot, and a special article. He paused briefly before continuing. This year's issue focuses on diversity, so they're inviting photographers and interviewers from different countries. I was lucky enough to be selected. That's wonderful. He gently rubbed his thumb across Peach's hand. I was only surprised. Usually you'd tell me about something like this right away. They gave me very little time to decide, so I accepted before I had a chance to tell you. Peach smiled apologetically. But, if you don't like the idea, I'll call them and cancel. Thee frowned immediately. Seeing Peach look so discouraged tightened something painfully inside his chest. Ever since the day they'd met, Thee had never once been able to resist him. The mob boss leaned over, pulled Peach into another embrace, and kissed his temple. No. His voice softened. It's fine. I trust your judgment. He smiled gently. Just take care of yourself. Travel safely. I'll be waiting for you. Peach's face instantly brightened. He rested comfortably against Thee's broad chest, obviously relieved. Then, with a mischievous smile, his hand began wandering. First across Thee's shoulder, then down his side, until it reached his firm backside. Squeeze. Peach quickly leaned back and flashed an exaggerated grin, baring his teeth playfully, as if issuing a warning. Thee chuckled. His eyes sparkled with amusement before he leaned in once more. He brushed several light kisses across Peach's lips. One, then another, until the playful kisses gradually deepened into something far more passionate. Peach didn't pull away. Instead, he tilted his head, inviting Thee closer. Their lips lingered together. Their tongues slowly intertwined. The quiet sounds of their kisses echoed through the room, filling the silence and sending warmth coursing through both of them. The heat between them rose quickly. As Thee gently eased Peach backward onto the soft mattress, desire shone plainly in his eyes. He smiled to himself. People always said the sweetest moments were reserved for a wedding night. But when you were a mafia boss, any night could become another honeymoon. Everything else could wait. Thee looked down at the man sleeping peacefully against his chest. Peach's arms rested limply across him, his slow, even breathing proof that he had fallen into a deep sleep after the previous night's exertion. Thee leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to his smooth forehead. He quietly reached for his phone. For a moment, he considered calling Ralph. Then he stopped himself. No, Peach is asleep. If I call, I'll wake him. Instead, he opened the chat app. Arseny, investigate that financial magazine for me. He absent-mindedly tapped his fingers against the mattress while waiting. Less than 5 minutes later, a reply arrived with an attached report. Ralph, World of Bank is the world's leading financial magazine, based in the United Kingdom. Their latest issue focuses on global diversity. They've invited 4 internationally recognized business leaders for interviews and a joint photo shoot. Mr. Peach has officially been selected as one of the photographers for the project. He narrowed his eyes. For some reason, he was still irritated. He sighed before typing another message. Arseny. So I'm not considered an internationally recognized business leader? Ralph, you are, sir. Ralph, you declined their interview request last week. He froze. He stared blankly at the screen before slowly remembering. That's right. He had rejected an interview request the previous week. Therakit rarely gave interviews. He never enjoyed being in the spotlight, and he only attended public events when absolutely necessary. Since Peach disliked social gatherings just as much, he was perfectly happy living quietly alongside him. Given the choice between dressing up for an elegant gala or staying home cuddling Peach in bed, the answer was obvious. Unless Peach was the one behind the camera. That changed everything. A thought suddenly crossed his mind. Could the magazine have invited Peach as a photographer simply to lure him into accepting the interview? Then again, that seemed unlikely. Although he never hid the fact that he was married, he wore his wedding ring openly. He had never made Peach the center of public attention. Peach disliked the spotlight, and considering the Arseny family's enemies, keeping him out of public view was the safest choice. After a moment, he shook his head. It didn't matter whether they had used Peach as bait or not. They had succeeded. Arseny, I'm accepting the interview. Arseny, do whatever it takes to get me onto that project. A few seconds later, he sent another message. Arseny, clear my schedule next month. Arseny, I'm going to England. Ralph, the assignment only lasts 3 days, boss. He frowned. 3 days? Interviews and a full photo shoot squeezed into only 3 days? That sounded ridiculous. How were the photographers supposed to produce quality work under that kind of pressure? Arseny, I want everything to come out perfectly. Arseny, a month sounds much more reasonable. Ralph, but next month you have the Valentine's collection planning meeting. Arseny, hold it online. Arseny, We're a modern company. Stop clinging to outdated habits. Completely satisfied with his own reasoning, Thee smiled. He leaned down and kissed Peach's soft hair before whispering beside his ear. I told you. His lips brushed lightly against Peach's ear before giving it a gentle nibble. Sleepily, Peach squirmed and buried his face deeper into Thee's chest in an attempt to escape. Thee laughed quietly. You're not getting away from me. Even if you run to the ends of the earth, I'll still follow you. He tightened his embrace ever so slightly. Not even death could separate us. Chapter 3. Peach stood in the doorway, staring at his husband in disbelief. He hated drawing attention to himself, so when he suggested sending him on a private jet, and even leaving it in England for him to use throughout the trip, Peach simply stared at him blankly, raised a hand to stop him, and firmly refused. Or would you rather have a brand new jet with your name on it? I can have Ralph place an urgent order right now. No. Thank you. Peach replied even more firmly. Still, he couldn't help wondering why they seemed so determined to involve a private jet in everything. And another thing, could you really order a jet on express delivery? Deciding that asking the question might actually result in receiving a brand new aircraft, Peach wisely kept his curiosity to himself. Now it was finally time to say goodbye. To his surprise, he didn't pull any last-minute stunt. Instead, he simply wrapped Peach in a tight embrace, as though he couldn't bear to let go, and murmured softly, a journey of 3,000 miles. If it's meant to be, we'll meet again. Peach blinked in confusion before turning toward Ralph, who stood nearby with his usual impassive expression. The secretary cleared his throat. The boss has been studying Chinese lately. Peach didn't need to ask what kind of studying that meant. With a quiet sigh, he decided it might be time for him to start watching Chinese dramas too. At this rate, he'd need to improve his Chinese just to keep up with his husband. Even then, Therakit wasn't finished. The mob boss pulled Peach into one last embrace, kissed his temple gently, then released him without another word, allowing him to walk away. That was unexpected. As Peach walked toward the departure gate, he found himself glancing back several times. It wasn't because he doubted Thee's love. He could feel that unwavering affection in everything Thee did. What puzzled him was how easily Thee had accepted letting him travel abroad for an entire month without putting up a fight. Unless he already had something planned. That lingering suspicion stayed with Peach throughout the flight to England. Even in first class, with a spacious seat that converted into a bed, he couldn't sleep well. By the time the plane landed, he was exhausted. After checking into the hotel, he decided to spend the rest of the day resting. Peach slept for nearly 10 hours. When he finally woke, it was around 3 o'clock in the morning. Although he wanted to sleep longer, he couldn't. So he got up and took a refreshing shower. He was already accustomed to working through the night as a photographer, so being awake at 3 in the morning didn't bother him. After showering, he got dressed, checked the time back in Thailand, and called Thee. The phone rang only once before it was answered. The screen showed Thee in a fitted business suit. You're awake already? Thee asked, glancing at the clock. It's only 3 in the morning there. Are you feeling dizzy? It's probably just jet lag. Peach smiled warmly as he looked at his husband. But I think I've rested enough. His eyes wandered over the video feed. Busy day? It's only 9 in the morning over there. Normally, Thee arrived at the office around 9:30, with departmental meetings beginning at 10:30. Yet he was already sitting at his desk. Judging from the unusually large stack of paperwork, he looked busier than usual. Work's been a little hectic lately. Thee replied with a smile before smoothly changing the subject. How are things over there? Is everything all right? Do you need anything? Everything's fine. Peach chuckled softly. In fact, everything's going even more smoothly than I expected. Peach had always lived simply. Even after marrying Thee and becoming surrounded by luxury beyond anything he'd ever imagined, he remained careful with money. He only used what he truly needed. That's good. Thee smiled without saying anything more. He simply gazed quietly at Peach, as though he wished he could reach through the screen and hold him. His fingers gently brushed across the display. I miss you. His voice was low and husky, almost a whisper. It sent a pleasant warmth through Peach. His cheeks flushed faintly. I miss you too. After saying goodbye, Peach ended the call. He sat there for a moment, staring at the dark screen before deciding to get moving. He couldn't sleep anymore, and he didn't want to interrupt Thee while he was working. After briefly calling his younger sister to let her know he'd arrived safely, and reassuring her he hadn't forgotten her souvenirs. Peach left the room to explore the area around the hotel. The hotel had been booked by the. When Peach landed, a car had already been waiting to pick him up, so he'd been too tired to notice much of his surroundings. Now he finally had the chance. The hallway stretched before him beneath a deep red carpet. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, while floor-to-ceiling arched windows overlooked gardens bursting with flowers glowing in the early morning light. The hotel they had chosen was flawless. Peach smiled to himself. Even from thousands of miles away, he could still feel how carefully they looked after him. Instead of heading toward the restaurant, Peach walked outside. He had never been much of a breakfast person, despite these repeated attempts to change that habit. Besides, it was still too early to eat. A walk through the cool English morning sounded far more appealing. The fresh air was something he could never experience back home in Thailand. As a photographer, there was no way he could let such beautiful morning scenery go uncaptured. He raised his camera. Click, click, click. A few more steps brought him into one of the hotel's gardens. It seemed the enormous hotel had several gardens, each designed around a different theme. This one was filled with lush greenery and colorful flowers arranged in a hedge maze. The hedges stood around 5 feet high, tall enough to create winding paths, but not so tall that anyone could truly become lost. Flowers bloomed throughout the greenery, filling the air with a sweet fragrance. Peach wandered through the paths, taking photographs as he went. The weather was perfect. The air was cool. The peaceful surroundings made him lose all sense of time. Then, as he lifted his camera again, a woman appeared in the viewfinder. Peach immediately lowered the camera. Photographing strangers without permission was rude, especially someone staying at a luxury hotel like this. He had no desire to create unnecessary trouble, even with this influence. Peach always preferred avoiding problems whenever possible. The woman had clearly noticed him. She looked him over quietly, her expression calm. Feeling slightly awkward, Peach offered her a polite smile and a small nod. She held his gaze for a moment. Then a faint smile appeared. The tension eased. Yet, for some reason, Peach felt a chill run down his spine. "Good morning," he greeted politely. The woman slowly approached. Her smile widened, though it never quite reached her eyes. She was strikingly beautiful. Long golden hair fell to her waist. Her deep-set blue eyes were large and captivating, carrying an intensity that made her seem more intimidating than gentle. Tall and slender, she bore the graceful signs of maturity, yet her beauty remained undeniable. "Hello," she smiled. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Excuse me." Peach blinked. "Have we met before?" As a photographer, he was confident he wouldn't forget someone so beautiful if they'd ever met. "You probably don't remember me." Her unreadable smile remained. "But I know who you are." She looked him straight in the eyes. "You're the lover of the Arseny family's heir." She paused. "The big fish. You're not exactly someone people overlook." Peach froze. His smile remained polite. Inside, his thoughts raced. The Arseny family possessed immense power, and just as many enemies. Although his relationship with thee had never been publicly advertised, neither had it been hidden. They had proudly introduced him at countless events. Anyone paying attention knew exactly who Peach was. That made this encounter potentially dangerous. The woman seemed to remember something. She nodded lightly. "Well, I'm sure we'll see each other again." Then she turned and walked away. Peach watched her leave. Something about the look in her eyes lingered in his mind. "I'll tell thee about this later." By the time Peach returned to the dining room, he pushed the encounter aside. There was nothing else he could do besides remain cautious and focus on his work. Right now, he only wanted to finish the assignment and hurry home. He already missed Mr. Thee. After breakfast, Peach returned to his room to get ready. Before long, he was on his way to the studio. Today's schedule was only an introductory meeting. The actual photo shoots would begin in a few days. The photography studio was enormous. Peach stepped inside, unable to hide his excitement. Although he was already a well-known photographer in Thailand, this was still the largest professional studio he'd ever worked in. He headed straight for the meeting room. After knocking twice, he quietly entered. 3 people were already inside, each waiting comfortably in different corners. "Hello, you must be Mr. Peach." A dark-skinned man approached enthusiastically and offered a handshake. His curly hair was tied into a low bun, and square black glasses rested on his friendly face. "I'm Nathan. I've heard of you before. Your award-winning photo series 3 years ago was incredible. Thank you, Mr. Nathan. Peach smiled politely before greeting the others. Hello, I'm Peach. I knew it had to be you. A woman stepped forward to shake his hand. When the editor said we'd be working with a photographer from Asia, your name was the first one that came to mind. She smiled brightly. I'm Lawrence. Nice to meet you. I've known your work for years, Peach replied. Your photographs from the last Olympics were incredible. Your timing and composition were perfect. Damn. The conversation came to an abrupt halt. Everyone turned toward the source of the voice. A tall, thin blonde man sat nearby. His slick-back hair was perfectly styled. Pale blue eyes matched his tailored navy suit and polished black shoes. He looked at them with open disdain. So, he laughed mockingly. Finished flattering each other. Can we finally get down to business? His voice dripped with contempt. Honestly, you yellow monkeys really do love wasting time. Peach looked at him silently. The faint smile never left his face. Only his eyes changed. A cold, icy stare settled over him. The blond man met his gaze. Then, he faltered. Several awkward sounds caught in his throat before he abruptly turned away, choosing not to say another word. It seemed, this terrifying glare really was useful. As though nothing had happened, Peach smiled warmly again and turned back to Lawrence. I'm not late, am I? Shall we get started? Not at all. Lawrence grinned. She looked thoroughly impressed by what she'd just witnessed. Come on. All the important people arrive tomorrow. We need to divide the work today. Peach nodded and walked over to the whiteboard. Nathan was already waiting there. Clearing his throat, he addressed the group. All right. We'll be interviewing 4 internationally renowned business leaders. He glanced around seriously. A couple of them have complicated backgrounds. They could be dangerous. So whatever happens, don't offend anyone. Peach nodded in understanding. They probably weren't very different from meandthee. Definitely not the sort of people an ordinary person should provoke. He accepted the file handed to him. The moment his eyes fell on one particular name, a tiny smile appeared. Kian. The name surfaced in his mind before he could stop it. Embarrassed, Peach gave a quiet cough and quickly opened the file. Inside was the profile of the businessman he would photograph the following day. Ivano Simone, a 40-year-old Italian entrepreneur. The file contained only a brief biography, enough to familiarize himself with the subject. Who did you get? Lawrence whispered curiously. Peach tilted the file toward her without hesitation. Ivano Simone. Lawrence peeked inside. My assignment's a businessman from mainland China. It seemed the magazine's commitment to diversity wasn't just for show. Giving the Chinese businessman to the red-haired woman with striking green eyes felt oddly fitting. Lawrence, however, seemed far more interested in Peach's assignment. That guy's famous. I heard he started as a small fruit farmer before building one of the biggest food companies in the world. I have no idea how I ended up on a project like this. Your assignment's just as impressive. Peach pointed to the photograph in her own file. Each one. He's basically a legendary salesman. Everyone across Asia knows his name. They say he can sell absolutely anything. The Chinese really know how to make money. Lawrence sighed in admiration. Money truly was a universal language. They'll all arrive tomorrow, Nathan continued. The magazine's staff will handle transportation. They'll explain the concepts, locations, and schedule. But in the end, we'll have to adapt to whatever each guest wants. Nathan let out a weary sigh before lifting another stack of documents. We'll also have interview hosts managing the conversations. Our job is simply to take photographs. There'll be 3 sets. A formal portrait against a white backdrop during the interview. A second shoot at a famous location in England. And a casual lifestyle set. He shrugged. The final one depends entirely on what each guest agrees to. As for Francois, Nathan sighed again. I'll handle him myself. Peach smiled sympathetically. Good luck. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As Peach prepared to return to his hotel, he briefly considered calling me. Before he could, Lawrence stopped him. Tomorrow's going to be exhausting. She mimed raising a wine glass. Want to celebrate tonight? Peach laughed softly and raised his left hand. I'm going to pass. I'm still a little jet-lagged. And if I don't get enough rest, my partner will scold me. Lawrence narrowed her eyes. The silver wedding band on Peach's ring finger caught the light. She let out an exaggerated groan. Fine. Go home, Mr. Family Man. I'm so tired of people happily drunk on love. Laughing, Peach said goodbye and headed back toward his room. Along the way, he took out his phone and called his husband. After calculating the time difference, he figured there was still a chance of catching thee before bedtime. But even after reaching his room, no one answered. Not thee. Not even Ralph. Chapter 4. meandthee is currently traveling, but as far as we know, he's safe. Peach let out a long sigh at Ralph's words. Ralph was the new secretary who had taken over from meandthee's former right-hand man, after meandthee transferred to work under Therakit's younger brother, Arseny, who had officially become the head of the Arseny family. Even so, they all remained in close contact. Peach hadn't expected to speak with thee today. The team had originally planned to have dinner together after the meeting to finalize the project's main concept. However, because of what had happened that morning, everyone ended up going their separate ways, and dinner was postponed. As soon as Peach returned to his room, he immediately tried calling thee. Again and again. No matter how many times he dialed, there was no answer. Unable to reach either his husband or his secretary, a wave of unease settled over him. The Arseny family had no shortage of enemies. The silence made his imagination run straight to the worst possible conclusion. Where did he travel to? Peach asked. Didn't meandthee tell you? Ralph replied. He only sent me a message saying he had business to take care of and was traveling. He didn't say where. Peach ran a hand through his hair in frustration, silently scolding thee. More than anything, he just wanted him to be safe. I'm afraid it's not my place to say anything more, Ralph replied gently, clearly trying to reassure him. Please don't worry too much, Mr. Peach. I'm sure meandthee will contact you as soon as he's able. I'll keep an eye on everything here as well. If anything happens, I'll call you immediately. Peach quietly thanked him before ending the call. He folded his arms and stared at the dark phone screen, lost in thought. He couldn't stop worrying about thee. Although the Arseny family had been relatively stable lately, with Rome firmly consolidating his position as family head, that didn't mean every danger had disappeared. Hidden threats still existed. At the same time, something told Peach that he was planning something. After thinking it over, he sighed again. There was no point overanalyzing it. If Ralph wasn't panicking, in fact, if he sounded completely unsurprised, then perhaps Peach shouldn't worry so much either. All he could do now was prepare himself, because whenever he planned something, it was almost guaranteed to be unexpected. Peach leaned back in his chair and opened the folder in front of him. His brows knitted together as he tried to focus. For the 5th time, he read the exact same sentence. And once again, he had no idea what it said. With a defeated sigh, he slammed the folder shut and tossed it onto the table. His fingers rubbed his temples, trying to ease the tension gathering there. It didn't help. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop thinking about thee. He knew there shouldn't be anything to worry about. The Arseny family knew how to protect themselves, and he was more than capable of taking care of himself. There was no reason to believe he was in danger. Yet every time Peach looked at the documents before him, all he saw was thee's face. Not a single word registered. His gaze drifted toward the silent phone lying on the desk. His fingers twitched with the urge to check it yet again. God, I really am hopelessly in love with Kian. With a quiet groan, Peach rested his forehead on the table and absent-mindedly traced circles around his phone with one finger. He hadn't intended to fall asleep, but exhaustion quietly overtook him. Before he knew it, ring. The shrill sound of his phone shattered the silence. Peach jerked awake, his heart pounding. He grabbed the phone without even checking the screen. Hello? Did you find thee? Peach. It's me. That deep, familiar voice. Steady, warm, comforting. The tension instantly melted away. Peach raised a trembling hand to cover his eyes and slowly let out the breath he'd been unconsciously holding. Only then did he realize. He'd been holding it in all day. The moment he heard thee's voice, the crushing weight on his chest finally eased. Where did you disappear to? His voice came out weaker than he intended. The anxiety he'd carried all day had left him exhausted. I'm sorry, thee said softly. I had to leave on urgent business. Everything happened so quickly that I didn't have time to tell you. His calm, reassuring tone carried the effortless confidence of someone accustomed to putting others at ease. Perhaps that wasn't something he'd always known how to do. Love had simply taught him. I was really worried. Peach hadn't realized how needy he sounded until the words left his mouth. You disappeared. I couldn't reach you. I couldn't reach Ralph. Even Mock wouldn't tell me anything. My fault. Thee laughed quietly. I thought you'd be busy until late. so I figured I'd be back before you noticed. I didn't expect your meeting to end early. Peach rolled his eyes, even though they couldn't see him. Some idiot made sure it finished ahead of schedule. Idiot. Thee's voice changed almost imperceptibly. It became colder, sharper. If Peach hadn't known him so well, he probably wouldn't have noticed. Did something happen? Are you alright? You're not hurt, are you? I'm fine. Peach smiled reassuringly. Nothing serious happened. It was just an argument. You don't have to worry so much, Kian. Now it was Peach comforting his husband. He understood exactly how the Arseny family handled problems. They had never been known for letting anyone challenge them without consequences. He had always tried to keep that side of his life away from Peach because he knew how much Peach disliked violence. It wasn't because Peach feared him. He knew without question that they would never hurt him. He was the only family he'd ever truly had. The only person who had ever made him feel safe. He simply didn't want a petty disagreement to become something much bigger because of him. I understand. Thee's voice softened again. So, what are you doing now? It's already late there. Have you eaten dinner yet? Only then did Peach notice how dark the room had become. The sun had set hours ago. A loud growl from his stomach reminded him of something else. Strange. I wasn't hungry until I knew thee was safe. I think I fell asleep. Peach rubbed his temples. I've only just woken up. I'm still a little jet-lagged. But now I'm starving. I should eat something before going back to bed. Otherwise I'll be exhausted tomorrow. And Francois would no doubt find another reason to criticize him. There was a brief silence. It sounded as though they wanted to say something, then thought better of it. Instead, he simply reminded Peach to eat well and get some rest. That hesitation felt unusual. Normally, he wasn't like this. Perhaps he was simply tired from traveling. Peach decided not to press him. After exchanging a few more words, they ended the call. Peach stood and headed for the elevator while searching his phone for nearby restaurants. Unfortunately, England wasn't Thailand. There were no late-night street food stalls waiting around every corner. The nearby options were either upscale restaurants requiring reservations, or bars that served little more than drinks. Especially on a cold, rainy English evening. With another sigh, he accepted reality. The hotel restaurant would have to do. The elevator arrived. The doors slid open. Standing outside, waiting to enter, was a familiar woman. Porcelain white skin, piercing blue eyes, long golden hair cascading over her shoulders. A midnight blue strapless dress hugged her elegant figure. For a brief moment, Peach stopped in place. Then he recovered and smiled politely, stepping aside. After you. It wasn't her beauty that surprised him. It was the fact that she was the same woman he'd encountered in the garden that morning. We meet again, Peach greeted with a friendly smile. The woman arched a delicate eyebrow before smiling back. It seems we do. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. She extended her hand. I'm Nira Pierce. Nice to meet you. Peach shook her hand politely. I'm Peach. He looked at her curiously. I can't shake the feeling that we've met somewhere before. The encounter in the garden had stayed in the back of his mind all day. Now that they had crossed paths again, he couldn't ignore it. Nira laughed softly. She withdrew her hand with graceful ease. Peach searched her expression, trying to read the meaning hidden behind those striking blue eyes. Before he could ask anything else, the elevator doors opened. Nira stepped out first. The hem of her dress swayed gently as she turned to face him. We've never actually met. She smiled mysteriously. But, you could say I'm your senior. My senior. Peach frowned in confusion. Nira's smile widened slightly. I'm Thee's ex-girlfriend. For a brief second, everything around Peach seemed to fall silent. His mind went completely blank. A faint ringing filled his ears. Then he blinked. Once. Twice. A slow smile spread across his lips. Well, that's certainly new. He laughed softly. His expression remained warm and relaxed. Only his eyes had changed. The familiar gentleness disappeared, replaced by something calm and unreadable. Nira quietly studied him. Her smile never faltered. Then she gestured toward the restaurant. Would you like to have dinner together? Eating alone gets rather boring. We could chat. Exchange a few stories. Peach tilted his head slightly. His polite smile remained perfectly in place. I can't think of much we need to talk about. Then he gestured courteously toward the restaurant entrance. But, I suppose dinner is more enjoyable with company. If you don't mind that I'm underdressed, would you do me the honor of joining me? A flash of satisfaction crossed Nira's eyes. Her smile grew even sweeter. I'd be delighted, Peach. Chapter 5. Peachy Yarret rubbed her temple lightly as she entered the study where the meeting was scheduled. She hadn't slept well the night before, tossing and turning as thoughts of the woman from dinner refused to leave her mind. In the end, she'd learned nothing. Nira had skillfully led the conversation in circles, revealing nothing of real substance. And Peach, too hesitant to press for the woman's true intentions, had simply gone along with it, smiling weakly while the meaningless conversation dragged on until the meal finally ended. And now I was overthinking everything. With a long sigh, she told herself to let it go. Nira was just someone looking to stir up trouble. Nothing more. More importantly, she trusted her partner. A man like Kian having previous relationships wasn't surprising. What mattered was what came after. And Kian had never broken a promise. Taking a deep breath, Peach straightened her shoulders, forced a small smile onto her lips, and pushed open the studio door. The room looked different from the last time she'd been there. The usual sofa had been replaced by a long table, and Nathan sat alone at one end. The photographer looked tense, his brow furrowed as he focused on the tablet in his hands. When he looked up and met Peach's gaze, he managed a brief nod before returning to what he was reading. Something was wrong. Is there a problem? Peach asked as she took the seat across from him. Nathan sighed quietly. Not exactly a problem. More like an inconvenience. Though, in a way, it might actually work out. He paused, clearly debating how to explain it. We just received word that a guest wants to join the project at the last minute. The problem is that their schedule clashes with our shoot, and I didn't arrange backup photographers or equipment. There's no one available to cover it. Peach tilted her head thoughtfully. Last-minute additions weren't unheard of, but for a project that required travel, schedules were usually finalized well in advance. Especially for high-profile business figures, whose calendars left only tiny windows for interviews. For someone to suddenly decide to participate, there was no way another team would be free to accommodate them. But the magazine's layout and theme have already been finalized, haven't they? Peach asked. How can we suddenly add another person? The publisher really wants this man. They're willing to cut other columns and add extra pages if necessary. We've contacted him several times before, but he was always unavailable. Nathan sighed again, looking both frustrated and resigned. Now that he finally has an opening, they're determined to make it happen no matter what. Which means we now have to fit 5 people into this issue. Peach frowned as she considered the situation. The only realistic solution would be to merge 2 teams so one could handle the new guest, or have the businessman share a session with someone already scheduled. Neither option sounded easy. These influential business figures weren't exactly known for being accommodating. If one of them became dissatisfied, the consequences could become far more troublesome than a scheduling conflict. After working alongside thee for years, Peach had started seeing things from his perspective. This wasn't just about logistics or reputation. It was also about safety. What if we speak directly to the guest? Peach suggested, though she sounded hesitant. We could explain the situation and ask whether they're willing to reschedule for next week. I can stay behind and handle that session myself. Nathan thought for a moment before nodding slowly. That might be our best option. Peach offered a reassuring smile as Nathan picked up his phone and began dialing. I'm the team leader. I'll take care of the extra session. You just focus on your model, Nathan said while waiting for the call to connect. Peach nodded and looked down at her tablet to review the information about the honorary model she'd been assigned. The pickup team had already gone to collect him, so they would be meeting soon. She figured it was best to read through everything again. She'd been far too distracted the previous night to pay proper attention. And that was all meandthee's fault. Because she'd been worried about him, she hadn't prepared as thoroughly as she normally would have. Peach pressed her lips together, grumbling inwardly. He had been so wrapped up in his own worries that she'd ended up worrying right alongside him. Though, knowing thee, he'd probably be delighted if he knew just how much she cared. A small smile tugged at the corner of Peach's lips as she sighed silently. I already miss Kian again. So that's what we'll do. Peach looked up at the concern in Nathan's voice. His team leader had turned slightly, looking uneasy as he continued speaking on the phone. If Mr. Simon has no objection, then neither do I, Nathan replied carefully. Peach raised an eyebrow. Simon. That was the surname of the Italian businessman in his early 40s whom she'd been assigned to photograph. Understood. I'll make the necessary arrangements. Nathan exchanged a few more polite words before ending the call. Turning toward Peach, he let out another long sigh, his face filled with guilt. Our guest says he's a friend of Mr. Simon's and would like to do the session together. There's no need for a separate shoot. Mr. Simon has already agreed. Peach blinked. If that was the case, didn't that mean she was the one taking on twice the workload? They also said they're perfectly happy with the equipment we've already prepared. No changes are necessary. Nathan looked even more apologetic. I'm really sorry, but would you mind taking responsibility for both of them? Peach chuckled softly, trying to lighten the mood. No problem. But with all this extra work, shouldn't I get a raise? Of course. Nathan answered without hesitation. You're basically doing 2 jobs now, so I'll make sure that's arranged. He handed Peach a business card. Here's the contact information for the coordination team. They've already picked up Mr. Simon and our 5th guest. You can head over with the rest of the staff now. A car is waiting outside. Peach nodded, said her goodbyes, and left the studio. Outside, a black van bearing the publisher's logo in large letters was parked by the curb. Excuse me, would you mind if I joined you? Peach asked with a friendly smile. Several members of the team glanced at her before quickly looking away, their expressions indifferent. She almost rolled her eyes. Not surprising. You must be Peach, a young woman asked with a welcoming smile as she stepped forward. Shall we go? We don't want to waste any more time. Sure. Peach climbed into the van without hesitation, refusing to let the cold reception bother her. Some people still clung to the outdated belief that race determined ability, that no Asian could possibly outperform a European. It was an ignorant way of thinking. Unfortunately, it still hadn't disappeared. Still, if all those people could do was quietly resent her, why waste energy worrying about them? The drive didn't take long. Soon, the van stopped in front of a 2-story white restaurant beside a broad river. A lush garden surrounded one side of the building, giving the place a peaceful, secluded atmosphere, as though it had been hidden away from the rest of the world. The entire restaurant had been reserved for the day. Today's shoot had to be completed, no matter what. Ordinarily, one day would have been more than enough. Peach had handled rush shoots that had to be finished within a single hour. But this was different. The subjects weren't professional models. They wouldn't know how to pose or control their expressions. On top of that, today's honorary models were people of tremendous social standing, meaning Peach couldn't simply direct them the way she normally would. And now she had 2 of them instead of 1. That made the job considerably more complicated. The setup crew had arrived early that morning. By the time Peach entered the restaurant, they'd already transformed one corner into a comfortable interview set, complete with an inviting sofa. The interview would come first. Her job was to capture photographs for the magazine. Adjusting her grip on the camera, Peach moved around the room in search of the best angles. Since the article focused mainly on the interview, photography wasn't the primary concern. And since she wasn't some world-famous photographer, she'd have to rely on her own instincts. She raised the camera to eye level, quietly adjusting the focus while searching for the perfect composition. Then excitement suddenly rippled through the staff. Their distinguished guests had arrived. Peach paid little attention. The interviewer was the real focus today. She simply continued looking through the viewfinder. Then, a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped into frame. His imposing build and commanding presence caused everyone nearby to instinctively move aside. Smoky gray eyes glimmered beneath the studio lights, and his sharply defined jaw was slightly raised, radiating quiet authority. Peach's breath caught. Her heart stopped for a split second before racing wildly. Slowly, she lowered the camera, unable to tear her eyes away from those familiar gray eyes. The same eyes she'd fallen in love with at first sight. The same eyes she'd loved ever since. Kian, she whispered. The mafia boss's lips curved into a faint smile, and the hardness in his eyes melted into unmistakable warmth. It was almost as if Peach could see an invisible tail wagging furiously behind him, restrained only by sheer determination. So his urgent business trip overseas was actually this magazine interview? Thirikit shifted as though he were about to walk over, but the instant Peach raised a hand in silent warning, he froze. His expression darkened immediately, an unmistakable scowl settling over his handsome face. The sudden change in mood made several staff members hesitate, unsure whether to approach him or stay well out of his way. "Meandthee, is something wrong?" The familiar voice snapped Peach from her daze. Looking around, She finally noticed the two men standing beside Thirikit. One was a tall, slender Thai man whose lean frame concealed well-defined muscles and powerful forearms. The other was an imposing man with ash-gray hair carefully styled away from his forehead, revealing a pair of piercing eyes almost identical to these. Mok, his former secretary turned brother-in-law, and the other, Krichdani Rome Arseny, Thee's biological younger brother and the current head of the Arseny family. What was more terrifying? Her husband suddenly appearing at her workplace, or the head of one of the world's most powerful mafia families casually walking through her studio. Hello. While Peach was massaging her temples to fend off an approaching headache, Thirikit had already crossed the distance between them. Clearing his throat, he extended a hand. You must be the photographer I'll be working with today. I'm looking forward to working with you. Peach accepted the handshake, surprised by the warmth of his grip. She intended to let go quickly. Thirikit clearly had other ideas. Instead of releasing her hand, he tightened his grip ever so slightly. Peach pursed her lips and discreetly glanced around to make sure no one was paying close attention. Then she gave his hand the smallest tug. A silent message. Let go. When she looked up, her wide brown eyes met his cool gray ones, unaware that her expression carried a quiet plea. Would you mind coming over here? Peach asked. I'd like to go over today's session with you. He didn't hear a single word. His entire attention was fixed on the warmth of Peach's hand, the faint calluses on her fingertips, and the irresistible look in her eyes. His body responded before his mind did. Sure, he answered immediately. Whatever you want. A faint smile appeared on Rome Arseny's lips as he watched the exchange. Leaning closer, he bumped Mok's shoulder with his own. Look at my brother, he said with obvious amusement. He handed over the leash and sat down like a well-trained dog. Mok glanced sideways with a single raised eyebrow. That alone was enough to make Rome clear his throat and instantly straighten his posture, pretending nothing had happened. A small, knowing smile crossed Mok's face before he turned his attention back to Peach. As Peach and he disappeared upstairs together, Mok quietly positioned himself to block anyone from following. Not wanting to be left out, Rome stepped beside him and copied the pose, standing there like an oversized bodyguard while his sharp gaze swept across the room, daring anyone to interfere. Honestly, there wasn't much difference between how Thee and Rome acted after all. Chapter 6. Peach hadn't heard a single word of the conversation downstairs. By the time he led Thee upstairs, the entire floor was empty, and used, quiet, and free from prying eyes. The moment they reached the top, Peach turned to face him, ready to speak. But before a single word could leave his lips, strong arms wrapped around him, and firm lips crashed against his own. The kiss was desperate and consuming, like that of a starving man. It was deep and relentless, claiming every inch of him without hesitation, as though Thee wanted to possess every thought, every breath, every trace of resistance. Yet beneath that raw hunger lay something else, something achingly gentle, as if he feared Peach might shatter in his hands. It was a kiss filled with longing, filled with love, with restraint stretched to its breaking point, with emotions too overwhelming to be contained. Thee kissed him again and again, refusing to pull away until Peach was flushed and breathless. Gathering what little strength he had left, Peach pushed against the man's broad shoulders, trying to create some distance between them. Thee finally, reluctantly, let him go, though not before stealing several lingering kisses, his lips brushing Peach's in slow, teasing bites. Kian, that's enough. We need to talk first, Peach managed, his voice hoarse and unsteady. His words were firm, but his body betrayed him. He trembled ever so slightly, and his breathing remained uneven. If he wasn't careful, things would spiral completely out of control. I'm sorry, Thee murmured with a heavy sigh. It's just, I missed you so much, damn it. Before Peach could answer, Thee pulled him into another crushing embrace. He held Peach as though he never intended to let go, as though he could protect him from the entire world simply by holding him tightly enough. Yet instead of feeling suffocated, Peach felt safe. It was the kind of warmth that made him want to close his eyes, melt into the embrace, and forget everything else. Whenever Thee held him like this, it felt as though nothing in the world could ever reach him. A quiet sigh escaped Peach as he buried his face against Thee's chest, his fingers clutching the fabric of his shirt. I missed you too. Thee's face immediately lit up with a broad, satisfied smile. He was about to bask in the victory of hearing those words when Peach suddenly stepped back and looked at him with complete seriousness. "But, Kian," he said firmly, "you can't tell anyone here that we're together." "Why?" Thee frowned immediately, his expression darkening. His arms tightened around Peach as though refusing to let him go. "Are you trying to keep me a secret? Hide me like I'm some forbidden lover? How dare you? Oh, how I love you, Mr. Dramatic." Peach remained completely expressionless. "What is this, a soap opera? Didn't you tell me you'd stopped watching those?" "Only a few dramas here and there," he muttered, clearing his throat before returning to the topic. "But why hide it? We're married. Even if you regret it later or change your mind, I won't leave you." He let out a heavy breath before cupping Peach's face with both hands. Then he leaned down and planted several short, deliberate kisses on Peach's lips, almost as though punishing him for saying something so upsetting. He might have looked surprised at first, but he still kissed back with shameless enthusiasm. "I never said I didn't want to marry you." Peach sighed after finally pulling away. His tone was weary but patient. "I just want to prove myself first." He slowly ran his tongue across his lower lip, clearly dissatisfied with how quickly the kiss had ended. Even so, he reluctantly continued the conversation. "Prove what? You don't have to prove anything to anyone." Peach met those deep, smoky gray eyes without flinching. "I want the first thing people call me to be photographer, not just Mr. Thee's lover." He didn't resent being known as Thee's husband. He wasn't ashamed of it, nor did he have any desire to enter Thee's world of power and influence. Peach was perfectly happy being an ordinary photographer, and he took pride in being loved by the man standing before him. But he had ambitions of his own. He wanted to be recognized for his talent and his work. When people spoke his name, he wanted it to mean something beyond being connected to Thee. "And if I want to become an internationally recognized photographer," he continued, "then my work has to stand on its own first. So you just let those people treat you like you're beneath them?" Thee snorted. His voice turned cold and razor-sharp, as though he were ready to kill someone on the spot. Yet beneath that simmering fury, he fought with everything he had to keep himself under control. He couldn't let his temper frighten Peach. Not when he knew exactly how deep those old nightmares still ran. Peach only smiled faintly. He wasn't surprised that Thee already knew. The man had warned him long ago that he'd assigned bodyguards to watch over him from a distance, protecting him without interfering with his daily life. It was simply a precaution. Even if Thee wasn't officially the head of any organization, life around the mafia was never truly safe. Back then, Thee had worried himself sick. He'd been terrified Peach would see the bodyguards as a cage, a way of controlling him and taking away his freedom. He'd imagined they would fight, that Peach would cry, scream, maybe even slap him, that he'd have no choice but to silence him with desperate kisses. Unfortunately for Thee, Peach had simply nodded with understanding and smiled. He never complained. He never looked uncomfortable. For some reason, that had left Thee feeling strangely heartbroken. Peach had once considered asking exactly why Thee seemed disappointed, but eventually decided it was probably better not to know. Shrugging lightly, Peach said, "From their point of view, I'm just some nobody without any real accomplishments. Then I suddenly show up acting like I have the authority to give orders. Of course they're going to be hostile. That's normal. Even so, they have no right to speak badly about anyone." Thee's voice remained icy, completely at odds with the warmth of his rough fingers gently cradling Peach's cheek, as though holding the most precious treasure in the world. "Especially you, my love." Peach tilted his head, leaning into the touch. He rubbed his cheek lazily against Thee's palm like a contented cat. He swallowed hard, his atoms apple-bobbing as he struggled to maintain his composure. Sometimes, all anyone needed was someone who would comfort them without question, reassure them, and give them the strength to keep moving forward. "I'm fine." Peach lowered his head and pressed a firm kiss against the broad palm resting on his cheek. Then he smiled brightly. "Kian, you're the fifth guest, right? How did you get Simon to agree? Our families used to do business together, so we met a few times as kids. Later, we became business partners, and we still talk about work now and then, so I had an opening," Thirikid explained, his eyes fixed on Peach's lips as though they couldn't bear to look anywhere else. "At first I declined because this sort of thing isn't really for me. But if you're the photographer, then I'd be happy to do it." "So you just showed up without even warning me?" Peach frowned deeply as he walked away. Do you have any idea how worried I was when I couldn't reach you? Were you trying to give me a heart attack? I'm sorry. They couldn't resist stealing another kiss, soft but persistent. I just wanted to see you as soon as possible. I thought surprising you would be better. I never meant to make you worry. Enough already. How many more kisses are you planning to steal? Peach snorted, pressing a hand over Thee's mouth to stop him. His cheeks were bright red as he shot him another glare. And what about the children? Who's looking after them? I already talked to those two, and my mom was flying to Thailand anyway, so she offered to watch them. Thee kissed Peach's palm once more before gently taking his hand. Let's buy them some gifts later. Peach pursed his lips as he looked into those smoky gray eyes overflowing with affection. His heart melted instantly. There was simply no way he could stay angry. What could he do? He loved Kian far too much. Every moment they spent apart left him feeling painfully empty. Fine. Peach sighed dramatically, pretending to be reluctant even though he wasn't. Let's finish work first. We can talk about everything else afterward. Thee's entire face brightened with delight. He looked so happy that Peach could almost imagine a wagging tail behind him. Without a single complaint, he followed Peach back downstairs. Work came first. Everything else could wait. By the time they returned, Simon had already arrived and was chatting with Rome. Judging by their conversation, the Simon and Arseny families were far closer than mere business associates. Simon was a broad-shouldered man. Although slightly shorter than Thee and Rome, he was nearly twice as wide. His powerful build stood out even beneath the crisp white shirt he wore, his suit jacket draped casually over one shoulder. His face carried the distinguished charm of a mature man. Deep-set eyes emphasized his striking blue irises, while a neatly groomed dark brown mustache completed the look. At first glance, he appeared warm and approachable. Still, Peach suspected that was only because he was with Thee and Rome. While Therakit walked over to greet them, Peach headed straight for his camera equipment. His tools kept becoming more expensive thanks to one certain person who constantly surprised him with the latest camera models. At least he hadn't bought an entire camera company. Not yet. As Peach adjusted his camera settings, making sure everything was ready, he noticed someone approaching from the corner of his eye. Looking up, he smiled warmly. Mock. Hello. It's been a while. How have you been? I've been well. Mock gave a small nod. His usual cold, detached expression softened slightly. And you? I hope Thee hasn't caused you too much trouble. Having once served as Thee's secretary, Mock had always assumed Peach's daily life was chaotic. Still, because it was Peach, he believed everything somehow remained under control. No problems at all. Peach laughed, immediately understanding what Mock meant. Although I recently started learning Chinese, and let's just say it's been a little confusing. Thee had been studying Chinese by watching dramas again. Unfortunately, he seemed to remember the Thai subtitles far better than the actual Mandarin dialogue. And you, Mock? How have you been? Peach glanced toward Rome. How did the two of you end up here? Rome was now the head of the Arseny family, overseeing their Russian operations. Although he had an explosive temper, he wasn't the type to waste time on meaningless outings. Seeing him here purely for fun was definitely unexpected. Rome was negotiating with Arseny's European branch, Mock explained with a weary sigh. When he found out Thee was coming, he insisted on coming along. But don't worry. He's not here as the head of Arseny this time. He's just acting as Thee's bodyguard. I'll make sure he doesn't interfere with your work. Peach smiled sympathetically and gave him a light pat on the shoulder. Looks like you've got your hands full. Mock said nothing. He merely smiled faintly, the corners of his eyes lifting with rare amusement. Even so, a sharp glint remained in them. It never truly disappeared. By the way, Mock. Peach lowered his voice while looking down at the camera in his hands. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you know anyone named Nira? Mock frowned slightly. Nira? You mean Nira Pierce? So he really did know her. For a brief moment, Peach's heart seemed to stop before settling back into a normal rhythm. He wasn't devastated. He wasn't heartbroken. Everyone had a past. Good memories. Bad memories. Experiences that shaped who they became. What Peach couldn't understand was why this woman had suddenly appeared and introduced herself as his boyfriend's ex. What exactly did she want? He was about to ask more questions when a shadow suddenly fell over them. Both men turned at the same time. Standing there with folded arms and narrowed eyes was the very man they had just been discussing. His suspicious gaze moved back and forth between them. What are you two talking about? Plotting something? Rome's tone was sharp. Or did Peach get himself into trouble again, and now you're sticking your nose into things that don't concern you? The two men blinked in confusion. Exactly what kind of people did these brothers think they were? Nothing like that, Mock replied calmly. Peach was just asking why you're here. What? I'm not allowed to follow you. Rome's tone remained curt, but his eyes sparkled mischievously. With everything happening here, you think I'd just stay behind and miss all the fun? Fun? Peach sighed. What part of this disaster looks fun to you? Everyone around him seemed determined to do whatever they pleased. I'm just here to make sure my brother stays safe. Rome stood proudly with his arms folded. His lover barely looked at him before answering in a completely flat voice. Your presence only makes things more dangerous and more complicated. Mock, the head of the Arseny family, cried out dramatically, looking at his former secretary with an expression full of wounded despair. Peach couldn't help laughing. Rome always teased thee about learning melodramatic lines from the soap operas their mother forced them to watch. In reality, Rome was every bit as dramatic himself. Perhaps it really did run in the family. Mock remained completely unmoved. Ignoring Rome's theatrics, he turned back to Peach. Peach, you don't need to worry about Rome or thee. My team and I will handle everything. I'll make sure they don't cause any trouble. Peach chuckled at Rome's exaggeratedly pitiful expression before nodding. Thank you, Mock. I'll leave them to you. Hey, what's that supposed to mean? Rome protested, staring at his boyfriend with mock betrayal. Pretending not to hear, Mock simply smiled. It was only the faintest curve of his lips, but it was unmistakably there. His eyes sparkled with amusement. Peach laughed once more before his gaze drifted across the room. It met these. They had been watching him quietly from a distance all along. Peach smiled back, a soft, radiant smile filled with warmth and genuine affection. This was their family. No matter how far apart they were, they would always remain family. Just as they had promised on the very first day they became one.